Now, there are many benefits to digital payments because, as I mentioned, for businesses, they don't have to deal with just the hassle of managing cash, making change, and so on. And in addition, for both consumers and businesses, carrying cash around, has issues related to loss and theft. From the government's point of view, there are many advantages to moving to digital payments. Activities that are intermediated using cash often escape the tax net. So you bring a lot more economic activity out of the shadows and into the tax net. And the government may consider it a good thing. Maybe some people don't consider it such a good thing. In addition, the use of government provided money to finance illicit activities, both within countries and across countries, for drug trafficking, money laundering, and so on, that is certainly going to be mitigated. In India, we had the demonetization episode, which was well-intentioned, although perhaps not executed as well as it could have. And part of the idea there was to limit the use of cash for corruption. Now, removing cash is not going to eliminate corruption by any means. There are deeper forces at work, but certainly cash fuels at least petty corruption. So I think anytime you move to digital forms of payment that are going to leave a digital trace, it might lead people to think twice or thrice about using cash for illicit transactions or for corruption-fueled activities. But cash has many attractions for people who may lack access to digital means of payment, who don't have digital connectivity. Perhaps cash is still useful. If we were to face, an apocalyptic scenario, such as a total communications breakdown or an electricity breakdown, cash is going to come through in a pinch. Although I've written a book, The Future of Money, I must confess that I still tip my Uber drivers and coffee baristas in cash because, it has this tangible element that I think creates a personal connection. But I think the reality is that we're all going to ultimately give way to digital forms of payment because of all the benefits. And it's going to come with at least some costs, including the fact that anything digital ultimately is going to leave a trace. And even if there are technologies that give you some degree of privacy, the reality is that no central bank wants its money to be used without auditability and traceability of transactions. So just the prospect that any transaction can ultimately be traced in terms of the identities of the transacting parties, whether we want to live in that world is a thing we have to approach very carefully, not just from an economic or technocratic point of view, but also think about it at the level of society. In fact, there is a section in my book in chapter 6 where I talk about this fact that cash does encourage thriftiness. And there is some evidence to this effect that if you're using cash for a purchase, as opposed to a digital form of payment, especially a credit card, where the pain of a transaction comes later, that psychological pain associated with using cash relative to a digital form of payment certainly makes people less eager to spend when they're spending with cash. Now, one interesting thing to note is that over the last 18 months or so, when we've all been through a very difficult period as a result of the COVID pandemic, one curious thing happened in many economies around the world, including in India, including in the US and many others, that the holdings of cash actually went up, even though the use of cash in payments went down. Many of us have been switching to contactless payments. Here in Washington, DC, many of the places I go to have essentially stopped accepting cash, and they've persisted with that pattern after the pandemic. And yet, the amount of cash in circulation, or so to speak, in the US has gone up. So people seem to be holding on to cash because they view it as a very viable and important store of value in these very tumultuous times. So I think this tangible element, which is true of not just cash, but other physical assets like gold, the notion of having gold jewelry or a gold ingot or even a gold coin in your hands, I think makes it an alluring asset. But even there, as you can see, people are shifting away towards putting their faith in purely digital assets, which they can never get their hold on. So I think we're all beginning to develop a new mindset towards things digital rather than things tangible. Now, one of the difficulties of Bitcoin is actually something that was behind the origin of Bitcoin, which is the way in which transactions on the Bitcoin network are validated. At some level, Bitcoin is a technological marvel. I mean, the notion of being able to conduct transactions without knowing who exactly you're transacting with, because you see only the digital identities of the transacting parties, and being able to do this without a trusted third party intermediating those transactions is really quite remarkable. But the way in which transactions are validated on the Bitcoin network limits the amount of transactions that can be processed by the network, because the validation process is very computing intensive. And that essentially means that we're not going to get much scalability of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. Now, it turns out there are alternative ways of creating validation mechanisms, even in a decentralized setting. So, for instance, the second most important cryptocurrency by market capitalization, Ethereum, will soon be switching its consensus protocol from the proof of work protocol, which is what Bitcoin uses, to something called proof of stake, which is going to be a lot more efficient in terms of requiring less computing resources. So it's going to be less environmentally destructive, but it is also going to be much more scalable in terms of the volume of transactions. Now, Bitcoin could also, in principle, move to a different validation mechanism, a different consensus protocol. But given that a lot of people have invested time and energy in setting up these Bitcoin mining operations that give them a chance of acquiring Bitcoin through participation in this validation process, and given that that might actually undercut the value model of Bitcoin, I think we will not see changes in that direction. But what Bitcoin has given us, which I think is really going to be its ultimate legacy, is the blockchain technology. So blockchain is basically Bitcoin's way of using distributed ledgers, that is electronic public ledgers that are maintained on multiple computers. And the Bitcoin validation process for transaction turns out to generate a great degree of security, and also the blockchain use of the distributed ledger technology gives it a lot of resiliency, because now you don't have a single point of attack. The Bitcoin blockchain has not been hacked, and it's going to take enormous computing power to hack it. Certainly, there have been hacks of decentralized Bitcoin exchanges, but not of the Bitcoin blockchain itself. The blockchain technology, I think, is going to create a transformative set of developments in finance in terms of how we can create new products and services, how we can maintain, say, land records and many other public records and ownership records more broadly in a very open and transparent setting. We, of course, have non-fungible tokens as one example of how the blockchain can be used in different parts of the financial and even broader economic ecosystem. So that, I think, is going to be the legacy. And Bitcoin's value itself, I think, is continuing to be borne along by investors' faith. So at one level, I characterized it as a speculative bubble, but it's certainly one that a lot of people seem to believe in. But I will leave you with this one cautionary thought. There have been many speculative bubbles in history in the past that have lasted for a long time, that have brought in a lot of people, but many of them have ended pretty badly.